Hello everyone, tonight we begin in a kitchen that smelled like garlic grease and burnt dreams. You might not survive the quiet betrayal I'm about to tell you how a mother funded a fairy tale wedding and ended up sitting behind a tray of shrimp cocktail like an extra on someone else's big day. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? And what time is it for you? Now turn off the lights, maybe get a fan going for some soft noise, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. They sat me near the kitchen. That's where I watched my only son Ethan get married. I could see the ceremony through the swinging door behind a silver tray of shrimp cocktail. Yes, the same ones I paid for. I paid for every flower, every chair, every inch of that venue at the Red Barn at Pine Hill. But when the music started and the toasts began, I wasn't part of it. Not even close. I just smiled. Quiet. Composed. Because it was his day, right? Then, after the last bite of cake, I made one call and burned the whole thing down. They didn't even bother with a sign for me. No place card, no warm greeting. Just a folding chair in the hallway with a crumpled paper napkin draped over the seat. That was my place, wedged between a stack of greasy trays and a cart with one broken wheel that squeaked like it had arthritis. I stood there blinking for a while, trying to convince myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. The scent of marinara hung in the air, thick and sour, clinging to the steam that rolled out from the kitchen. I could feel the heat from the ovens at my back, and something inside me twisted like a rung dislodged on a ladder. I looked down at my dress, mauve chiffon hand-stitched. I'd spent 3 hours getting my hair done that morning, 3 hours pretending this day would matter to me just as much as it did to Ethan and Samantha. But no one told me anything. No one said, "We've made different seating plans." No one even looked at me when I walked in. Not even Ethan. He was too busy beaming, fixing his cufflinks, letting Karen Samantha's mother kiss him on the cheek like she'd raised him. Like she was the one who sat up through night terrors. Like she was the one who worked 2 hospital shifts back to back to pay for his braces. I clutched the little beige leather handbag Ethan had given me for Mother's Day years ago, back when he still called me Mama. My hands were shaking. Just a soft vibration in my wrists like a warning. The catering manager, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, offered me a tight smile. They said you were supposed to wait back here, ma'am. The bride didn't want, any visual clashes with the theme. Theme. He actually said that, like I was a color that didn't match their palette. He winced as the silver kitchen door hit the wall again. The music swelled. A burst of laughter from the reception. Just, aesthetic consistency for the photos and all. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked. There was a dark stain on the concrete floor beneath my heels. Gravy, maybe. My shoes stuck slightly when I shifted. I looked at my nails. Fresh, soft pink polish. I thought it might be classy, gentle, fitting for the mother of the groom. Then someone dropped a cold chicken breast on a chipped white plate in front of me. No sides, no garnish, no apology. And still, I said nothing. Not one word, because I told myself, don't ruin this for him. Don't be that mother. Because I paid for it all and still believed that meant something. I pulled out the program they handed out at Maple Grove Chapel. Cream cardstock, cursive script, no mention of me. Her father walked her down the aisle. Her mother gave the opening speech. I was the wallet, the ghost, the woman behind the steam. The door swung again. I caught a glimpse of the chandelier and the band tuning up for the first dance. Ethan and Samantha were twirling under soft gold light. He didn't look toward the kitchen once. I pressed my napkin to my mouth and pretended to dab away a stain. My eyes burned. I told myself it was the onions from the kitchen, the heat. Not betrayal, but it was betrayal. God, it was. Something cracked inside me. Not loud, not obvious, like a hairline fracture in glass you don't notice until the whole pane shatters. I stared at the wall across from me. There was a peeling patch of paint behind a rusted fire extinguisher. I focused on it like it might keep me upright, like it was a meditation anchor. Because if I let go, if I cried, I wasn't sure I'd ever stop. So I took a breath, then another. The chicken had gone cold. Eventually, someone brought out dessert. I didn't taste it. I just stared at the layers of white and gold frosting her colors, her vision. And then I reached into my bag and made the call. It was short, direct, 3 cancellations, the flowers for tomorrow's brunch, the second half of the band's payment, the open bar scheduled to run until midnight. My voice calm, controlled, not a trace of guilt. And when I hung up, I didn't feel regret. I felt power. The first flicker of something I hadn't known in years. I looked down at my hands, steady. My heart wasn't racing anymore. Just a low hum like a car warming up in the driveway after a long winter. The door swung again, another blast of laughter. More string lights, a life I had bought into but wasn't allowed to belong to. Let them toast without me. I had my own plans now. I didn't sleep that night, not a minute. I lay in that stiff hotel bed, still in my dress, staring up at the ceiling fan as it spun like it was chasing its own tail. At one point, I actually hoped it might unscrew and crash right down on my chest, anything to distract me from the hum crawling under my skin. My hair still smelled like kitchen grease and overpriced roses. I could still feel the tight pinch of my shoes, even though I'd finally kicked them off sometime after 2 a.m. My feet were swollen and red, but I'd refused to remove them during the reception. Why? Because even back there, next to used trays and a stack of dirty linens, I thought I had to look presentable. Still trying to prove I belonged. It was 3:12 a.m. when I finally sat up. The digital clock glowed an angry red, like it was scolding me for not sleeping. My phone buzzed on the nightstand again. I didn't check it. I already knew what would be their missed calls from Ethan, from Samantha. A message from my niece, Lisa, that just said, "What happened? Everyone's freaking out." I reached for my tablet instead, opened the spreadsheet. Yes, I had a spreadsheet. I'd been managing the wedding budget on it for over a year. Every payment, every invoice, every last-minute upgrade Samantha had asked for, always with that tight little smile and her favorite word, elevated. "Linda, we just want the welcome table to feel a little more elevated." That's how the centerpieces went from grocery store hydrangeas to custom floral rings from a boutique in Vermont. That's how we moved from the chapel basement to the red barn at Pine Hill with its whiskey barrels and Edison bulb chandeliers. That's how the simple bar package became a custom cocktail menu with hand-etched glasses. And I paid for it all, every cent. Not Ethan, not the Blakes, me. Because I wanted him to have everything I never could afford when he was younger. I scrolled through the most recent charges, then stopped. 2 unauthorized transactions. My breath caught. A rehearsal dinner venue enhancement and a bar tab from some tasting event at a rooftop place in the Main Street district. I double-checked the card. Mine. Used without permission. And just below that, like a punch to the throat, a Venmo note from Samantha to one of her bridesmaids. "His mom is covering everything. Might as well go big. Wedding vibes." That's when my stomach turned. Not from the hurt, from the disrespect. Like I was an ATM with a pulse. But I didn't cry. Not this time. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. That strange hollow nothing that happens after too much hurt when your nerves just shut down like overloaded circuits. When your brain tells your body don't bother, it won't make a difference. The only sound in the room was the low whir of the AC and my breath slow and flat. Eventually I got up and turned on the lamp. The light stung. I walked to the mirror above the desk. What I saw made me flinch. Mascara-smudged cheeks, sunken lips, pressed so tight I looked like I'd bitten through them. My hair, once full and curled, was deflated, smashed from the pillow, a shadow of what it was hours ago. But then, something shifted. I washed my face, brushed my hair, sat down at the desk, opened my email. 3 messages. 1 to the florist, "Please cancel Sunday's delivery. Final payment withheld. Thank you." 1 to the band, "Due to changes in the event schedule, we will no longer need your second performance. Please consider the matter closed." 1 to the cocktail vendor, "We're scaling back post-reception services. Cancel the second shift. Do not process the remaining balance." Each message was polite, professional, and final. By the time I hit send, dawn had started to break. The sky shifted from black to a soft, bruised blue, the kind of color that makes everything look slightly haunted. I closed my tablet, sat back on the bed, and just listened to the silence. And for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not angry, not vengeful, Just done. Done being the afterthought, the purse, the placeholder. Let them figure it out. Let them scramble when the brunch flowers don't arrive, when the band doesn't show, when the bar runs dry halfway through the final toast. Let them wonder why. Maybe, just maybe, they'll remember who made that wedding possible in the first place. The woman in the kitchen chair. The one who wasn't pretty enough for their theme. The one they didn't want in the photos. The one they forgot could pull the plug. Now here's something I've learned at 62 Power doesn't always come in the form of shouting. Sometimes it's 3 calm clicks and a send button. And here's a quirky fact. The average American wedding costs $30,000, but the cost of disrespect, turns out, that's the real price no one factors in. Later that morning, I sat back in that same hotel chair. My dress still wrinkled, my hands still tired, but my chest quiet, strong. I could hear the music pulsing from the ballroom downstairs like a distant heartbeat. Someone gave a toast. I imagined it was Karen or Robert Samantha's parents, full of big words and big voices. I imagined the champagne flutes raised, the cheers, the perfect pictures. But I also imagined the looks when the flowers didn't arrive, when the band packed up early, when the bar suddenly had no more mixers. And I smiled, not out of spite, out of peace. They thought I was invisible. They had no idea what I could take away. The morning after the wedding, I sat on the hotel bed with the tablet still open on my lap and the covers untouched. I hadn't slept. I wasn't tired. I wasn't anything, really, just hovering somewhere between clarity and calm. My phone buzzed again, a long, rattling vibration against the nightstand. I didn't pick it up. The last message I read from Ethan was from an hour ago. It said, "Can we talk? People are asking questions. What's going on, Mom?" I didn't reply. Let them ask. Let them guess. It's strange how quickly peace can slip into your life when you finally stop begging to be seen. I scrolled back through the spreadsheet one last time. Every line item, every receipt, every indulgence, the 5-tier cake, the hanging florals, the string quartet during cocktail hour. Each one chosen by Samantha with that same phrase, "We're just going for something a little more elevated." Elevated. As if my love had a ceiling and hers had a view. I shut the tablet and stood. My legs ached, the kind of ache that comes from more than just shoes. My body was carrying the weight of being tolerated for too long. I walked to the bathroom. The mirror showed a woman who looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. I pressed a cool washcloth to my face, then wrapped my hair into a low knot. I changed into jeans and a soft cotton button-down, something that smelled like lavender detergent in home. Then I zipped up my bag and left the hotel without checking out at the desk. Let the front desk call me. Let them wonder. I owed no explanations, not anymore. The air outside was heavy with that humid kind of summer quiet. My car was warm from the sun, but the silence inside was cold. I drove without music, without podcasts, without anything but the sound of tires on pavement. It's amazing how loud your thoughts get when you finally stop filling the space around them. He didn't even look at me during the first dance. She smiled when she saw me back there by the kitchen. They all knew where I was sitting, and no one did a thing. I pulled into the driveway just as the heat of the day was starting to lift. My roses planted 2 summers ago were in full bloom along the fence, but I didn't stop to admire them. I went straight inside, straight to the bedroom, and opened the dresser drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a red file folder. I had nearly forgotten it. Legal papers, old insurance documents, letters. One envelope postmarked from Arizona dated years ago. I held it in my hands for a long time before sliding my finger under the flap. Inside was a letter, my late husband Michael's handwriting, slanted, nervous. "Linda, I know you never wanted to hear from me again, but I need to tell you something. I can't take this with me. You deserve the truth. Ethan, he isn't biologically yours." I stopped reading. The room shifted. Not like the floor dropped out from under me, more like gravity doubled. I sat down the letter, trembling in my hands, my breath short and shallow. I found out years ago. Samantha, that's the woman I was with before she got pregnant. I told her I'd raise the baby if she walked away. I never told you the full story. I told you he was ours. I told you I made a mistake early in our marriage. but he wasn't ever mine to give, and he wasn't ever yours. But you made him your world anyway. The rest of the letter blurred. My eyes weren't crying. My body wouldn't allow that yet. I just stared at the words. Words written by a man long gone. Words that sat quietly in my dresser while I built an entire life on a foundation I didn't know was a lie. Ethan, my Ethan, wasn't mine. Not biologically, not by blood. I had raised another woman's child. I had loved him with a mother's heart, a mother's hands, a mother's everything, and now I knew why maybe I never truly belonged in the pictures, why I was easier to erase. I stood slowly, the letter still in my hand. And yet, I didn't feel destroyed. Not anymore. I felt something else. Relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the distance, the exclusions, the silence. It had always been there. I just hadn't known its name. Here's something I learned from a nurse friend once. Grief and clarity can live in the same house, but they don't sit at the same table. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. Black strong. The bitterness steadied me. Outside, the neighbor's sprinkler ticked back and forth across his lawn. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, scrolled down to the vendor list I'd created for wedding logistics. Florist, band, bartender. I called each one again, not to argue, not to explain, just to reaffirm. Yes, the cancellation still stands. No, I won't be needing those services after all. Thank you. 3 calls, 3 confirmations. 3 lines cut from a story I never asked to be written into as a footnote. Then I turned off my phone completely. I didn't need to hear Ethan's voice. Not yet. I sat at the table and watched the sun rise a little higher. My hands no longer shook. It's funny how steady you can feel when you finally stop carrying everyone else's expectations. They thought I was just the funding, but I was the foundation. And now, let's just say, they're about to learn what happens when you pull the wrong brick. It started with a hum. Not a real sound, just something internal. A vibration running underneath everything like a low current of energy I hadn't felt in years. I was sitting at my kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, staring out at my yard, like it might hold the answer to what I should do next. I had made the calls, canceled what needed canceling. I'd read the letter that redefined my entire motherhood. And now, it was quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but not in a bad way. I stood up and started cleaning. Not out of stress, not to busy my hands out of instinct. A lifetime of solving messes with motion. The counters wiped. Mail sorted. I even cleaned out the junk drawer, which had become some kind of archaeological site. Expired coupons, batteries, that probably dated back to the Obama administration, 5 pens that didn't work. Then I pulled open the cabinet where I kept the wedding paperwork. Not digital records, real printed receipts. There it was, the checkbook stub from the florist contracts with the band, signed agreements, down payments, catering invoices, even the deposit for the bridal suite at Greenfield Inn and Suites. All of it in my handwriting. All of it signed by me. I paused at the final page, the rehearsal dinner bill. Same restaurant, same back corner near the kitchen where they'd seated me again. And there's scribbled in a loopy hand, "Thanks again for everything, Linda. You're making this day unforgettable." Samantha had added a smiley face, the gall of it. I held the receipt to the light like maybe it would tell me something new. It didn't, but something inside me stirred anyway. I turned on my phone. Voicemails, 17 of them. Missed texts, Ethan, Samantha, even Karen in all her faux politeness. And then one message from Lisa. "Aunt Linda, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Everyone's talking about it now. I think you did the right thing." I stared at that message for a long moment. It was the first time anyone had used the word right. Not dramatic, not petty, not bitter. Right. I felt my breath settle. There's a phrase people like to toss around, stay in your lane. But what if the lane they give you is a ditch? What if you pave the whole highway and still get told to wait on the shoulder? I decided I was done waiting. Just before noon, I opened Facebook. I hadn't posted in weeks, months maybe. But today, I uploaded one photo, a picture of the $29,475.822 check I'd written for the venue. The account number blurred the signature clear. No caption, no hashtags, no explanation. Just that. The comment section started slowly. A neighbor from church, whoa, is this real? A friend from work. I thought Ethan's fiancé came from money. Then someone I hadn't talked to in years wrote, if this is what I think it is, Linda, I see you. That one made me pause. It wasn't about airing dirty laundry. It wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility. If they wanted to erase me from the memory of the wedding, they'd have to erase the very paper it was built on. Let's talk about something I think most people don't like to admit. Women like me, women past 60 who've spent their lives giving, get treated like we're a footnote, like we're part of the furniture, unless we pay, unless we smile, unless we vanish at the exact right time. Well, I wasn't vanishing anymore. Around 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. I didn't move. Let them knock. Let them wonder. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore, especially not people who made me feel like an accessory to my own generosity. Here's a quirky fact for you. The average length of a wedding toast is 3 to 5 minutes. That's about how long it would have taken for Ethan to say, "And thank you, Mom, for everything." He didn't. And I will never forget that he didn't. By sunset, the photo had nearly 100 reactions. Some angry, some confused, a few clapping emojis. But the messages, those were something else. One woman from high school messaged me, "I saw your photo. My daughter got married last year. They did the same to me. I didn't even get a photo with her. I wish I had your strength." That's when I realized it wasn't just me. This wasn't an isolated thing. This was a pattern. Mothers who gave and gave only to be tucked behind swinging doors when the spotlight came on. No more. The messages kept coming. Strangers, friends, women who'd been seated near bathrooms behind columns outside with the smokers. All of us erased by people who should have known better. That night, I didn't turn the TV on. I just sat by the window with a glass of wine and let the quiet fill in the blanks. I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter. I was just awake. Awake in a way I hadn't been in years. And here's a bit of old age wisdom from a retired nurse who's seen too much peace doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from refusing to be diminished. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept like someone who didn't need to be forgiven for asking to be treated like a person. I woke up to silence. Not just the absence of noise, but that deep, settled kind of silence. The kind that comes when there's nothing left to fear. The light was soft through the window. I sat up slowly, expecting my usual tightness in the chest, but it wasn't there. No pit in my stomach. No dread. Just the quiet shuffle of morning, like the house was letting me breathe again. I made coffee. Strong, black, no cream, no sugar, just the way I used to drink it before I started watering things down for everyone else. Then I checked my phone. 6 missed calls, 3 new voicemails, 1 from Ethan. "Mom, please call me back. We need to talk. You embarrassed us. I don't know what you were trying to prove, but you crossed a line." I listened to it once, then deleted it. A line? He didn't know the line had been crossed long before I ever picked up that phone and made my cancellations. It was crossed the moment he stood beside Samantha's family and forgot mine. My breath didn't hitch this time. I didn't even blink. Instead, I pulled open my banking app and checked the charges again. Still there. Bar crawl, spa day, brunch for 8, all booked using my credit card unauthorized. Samantha had helped herself to a wedding week of luxury and used me to pay for it. The evidence was clear. Screenshots, receipts, dates, details. I could have started a war right there. Could have forwarded it to every one of their guests. Could have turned the Facebook post into a thread. But I didn't want a war. I wanted a boundary. And that's exactly what I was building. That morning I showered. Took my time. Steamed the hurt out of my skin. I wore my favorite blue shirt, the one I'd stopped wearing because it didn't match elevated wedding palettes. I pulled my hair back simply and felt like myself again. I opened the curtains and let the sunlight pour in. Here's something people don't tell you about aging. One day, you realize you've been waiting your whole life to finally be done, apologizing for who you are. I sat back down at the table and pulled out the red folder again. There was something else inside a note I hadn't seen before. Another letter from Michael. No envelope this time, just folded neatly and slipped between old documents. It was dated 3 days before his death. "Linda, If you're reading this, I guess the first letter reached you. I don't know if you opened it. I hope you did. I won't waste time apologizing again. I need to tell you something more, something I couldn't take with me. Ethan wasn't just someone else's son. He was never supposed to be yours at all. When Samantha left him at my door, she didn't want to keep him. She was 18, terrified. She asked me to give him up for adoption. I couldn't. I told her I would raise him. I lied to you. I told you he was ours, that it was a mistake from before we were married. You believed me. And then you loved him anyway. You raised him like he was yours. You gave him a life. You were the only person strong enough to be his mother. I sat there frozen, reading it again and again. Not biologically mine, not even accidentally mine. He was chosen for me by a man who then disappeared, left me holding the secret, raising a child I never even knew. Came from someone else's mistake. And I loved him like he was a miracle. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every book fair, every peanut butter sandwich without crusts. I built my identity around loving that child. And now he wouldn't even save me a seat. I folded the letter back up gently and placed it in the center of the table. It didn't feel like betrayal anymore. It felt like permission. Permission to stop sacrificing for someone who never saw me. Permission to stop rewriting myself into someone else's story. Permission to choose my name over his. That afternoon, I turned my phone back on. The message notifications flooded in again. Dozens now. More from Ethan, more from Samantha, one from Karen. Linda, I don't know what's going on, but this is incredibly unprofessional. You've upset a lot of people. The brunch is in shambles. People are asking questions. Good, let them ask. If I've learned anything, it's this. People will always call you unprofessional when they expected you to stay silent. I ignored the message. Instead, I opened a fresh notepad and started writing. Not a letter, not a response, a list. A list of things I wanted to do. Bake that lemon pound cake recipe from Dina at the bookstore. Plant more lavender in the garden. Repaint the guest room. Call Claire, the nurse I worked with for 15 years, the one who used to leave Post-it notes in my locker that said, "You're more than a shift." I hadn't called her in over a year. Life had gotten in the way. But now, I had life back. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Claire, I said I think I need a dinner party." There was a pause, then a laugh. "Linda Harris," she said. "Are you finally inviting people over without needing a reason?" "I have one," I replied. "It's called Reclaiming My Kitchen." That night, I pulled every family photo off the wall. Not in anger, not in revenge, just as a reset. I wrapped them gently, packed them in a box marked Memories Not Obligations. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the bare walls of my home not as emptiness, but as space for something new. I spent the next morning doing something I hadn't done in years, cooking for Joy. Not for a holiday, not because Ethan liked a certain dish, not because it was expected, just because I felt like it. The kitchen smelled like lemon zest and fresh rosemary. I played soft jazz on the old radio tucked above the fridge. Nora Jones Van Morrison, a little James Taylor. The house was warm, but not from the oven, from something else. I was choosing myself for once, and it felt like slipping into a pair of shoes that had been waiting in the closet, still perfectly broken in. The table I'd used for folding laundry and assembling science fair projects was now dressed in a sunflower blue cloth I'd picked up on a whim. The napkins didn't match. Neither did the plates, but I loved every piece of it. And for the first time, it wasn't about presentation. It was about presence. By 5:30 p.m., the first knock came. It was Claire holding a bottle of red and wearing those giant hoop earrings she always swore made her look like somebody's cool aunt. She walked in, looked around, and said, "Linda, you look like someone I should have called sooner." The words hit me hard in the chest. Not painfully, just truthfully. Over the next half hour, they all arrived. 6 guests, no spouses, no kids in tow. Just women who had lived enough life to know when another woman needed to be seen. There was Janet from my old unit at the hospital, Denise from the Sunday bookstore, Mr. Henderson, my next-door neighbor, who showed up with a lemon tart and immediately said, "Don't let the gender confuse you. I'm still the best dinner guest you'll ever have." We laughed. We passed plates. The wine flowed freely, but not messily. It was the kind of night where the conversation dipped and rose like music. And it was the first time in months that I heard myself laugh without hearing him in my head. Ethan's voice, Ethan's silence. Here's something I never knew I missed until it happened, the feeling of not having to ask permission to be included. Around dessert, Claire raised her glass and said, "To Linda for reminding us that it's never too late to take your seat at the head of your own table." Everyone clinked glasses. Even Mr. Henderson, who got choked up and muttered, "Damn onions in this tart." We laughed again. I wanted to stay in that moment forever. Just me, my people, and the hum of plates being cleared without expectation. But the world has a way of knocking right when you stop looking for it. The next day, the knock came again. This time it was different, steady, measured, familiar. Through the frosted glass of my front door, I saw the silhouette. Shoulders I'd carried through childhood colds. Hair I once smoothed back from a fevered forehead. Ethan. It had been a week since the wedding. 7 days of silence from me. 7 days of unraveling I imagined for him. I opened the door slowly. He looked smaller. Not physically, but something about him had deflated. The suit was gone. So was the glow. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt and old sneakers. His mouth twitched like he'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times and still couldn't find his line. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't say it back. I stepped aside. He walked in, his eyes flicking quickly across the room, pausing where the family photos had once hung. "Where are the pictures?" he asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I motioned to the armchair. "Sit." He obeyed, unsure. There was a long pause, thick with the kind of silence that isn't empty. It's just waiting for the truth. "I didn't come here to fight," he said finally. I don't understand what happened." I nodded slowly. "You don't understand why the band didn't show up, why the flowers never arrived, why your brunch turned into a potluck of cold bagels and confusion." He blinked. "Yeah." I walked into the hallway, returned with a box, and placed it gently on the coffee table. "What's this?" he asked. "Receipts," I said. "Every single one. From the last 12 months. He opened the lid, pulled out a few. Venue deposit, floral design consultations, cake upgrades, even the extra dance floor that Samantha insisted on for aesthetic balance. Then I handed him the letter. Michael's handwriting. His name. The truth. He read it silently, his face shifting, confusion, recognition, and finally, shame. When he looked up, his voice was a whisper. "You knew." "I do now," I said. I didn't know she told him to give me up. I thought I was, "You are my son," I said, "but not because of blood, not because of what anyone told me, because I chose to be your mother." He swallowed hard. His voice cracked. "Then why are you so angry?" I sat back, leveled my gaze. "I'm not angry because of who you are," I said. "I'm angry because you forgot who I am." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "You stood up there," I continued, beside her family, in a suit I helped pay for, and thanked everyone. Everyone but me. You knew where I was sitting, and you said nothing. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said softly. "But you did," I replied. "And not just by forgetting me, by making me feel like I was something to hide." There it was, the silence that comes after truth. "I'm sorry," he said. Too little, too late, but I nodded anyway. I stood and handed him the box. "These are yours now, all of it. Take the memories, take the choices, take the silence. It's yours to carry." He looked down, then back up. "Will I ever be able to fix this?" "I don't know," I said, and I meant it. Because sometimes love doesn't disappear, it just stops showing up for people who keep locking it outside. After he left, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble or sink into the couch like some tragic figure in a movie. I just closed the door. Softly, intentionally. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wait to hear footsteps fading down the walkway. I didn't listen to see if he'd knock again. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself another cup of coffee. It was still warm in the pot. That was the part that got to me the most, not the apology, not the excuses, not even the sudden awareness in his eyes when he read the letter. It was that he still thought he could walk in and fix it with a conversation, a hug, a little regret. Maybe I didn't mean it, but meaning doesn't matter as much as impact. And the impact, that folding chair by the kitchen, the paper napkin draped over it like a joke. He could never unseat me from that memory. You know, I once read that betrayal doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it comes with a smile, a toast, a little white lie dressed in chiffon and pearl earrings, the worst ones. They show up in the places you thought were safe. I looked around my living room. Clean, quiet. The family photos had been packed away, but the walls didn't feel bare anymore. They felt honest, like they'd finally been allowed to breathe. I stepped out onto the porch. The sky was turning that soft golden shade that only happens in early evening when the sun is just about to duck behind the trees and everything glows like it's forgiving the day. The roses along the fence nodded gently in the breeze, still blooming, still here. So was I. That evening, I sat down and wrote a list. Not of things I had to do, but of people who had seen me, really seen me. People who showed up without fanfare, who asked nothing but my presence and gave me theirs in return. At the top of the list was Claire, then Mr. Henderson, then Dina from the bookstore who once gave me a free novel when she saw me counting quarters at the register, then Janet, who stayed late after our final shift together just to help me carry out my locker contents in the rain. Not one of them shared my blood, but they were my family, and that gave me an idea. A dinner. Not a grand event, not an apology party, just a dinner here in my home. My food, my space, my table. No folding chairs, no back entrances. I would cook what I wanted, not what someone else had pinned on a board or tagged as wedding inspo. I would play the music I loved. Light candles because they made me happy, not because they matched the centerpiece. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I walked to the market and picked out basil by smell, not price. Heirloom tomatoes, in strange, beautiful shapes. Garlic so fresh, it still had bits of soil on the stem. I bought a bottle of olive oil imported from Italy, not because I needed it, but because I wanted it. I even bought myself a bottle of wine with a label I couldn't pronounce. That felt like power. And here's something strange I noticed: no guilt followed me home. Not once did I think, what if someone else needs this money? Not once did I consider whether Ethan would approve. That's how I knew the shift wasn't temporary. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a reckoning. The morning of the dinner, I woke up before my alarm. The light was soft and hazy, casting long shadows across my floorboards. I made coffee and played the radio. No weather reports, no news, just soft guitar and piano, notes that wandered, and then I cooked. The kind of cooking that makes the whole house smell like intention. Roasted vegetables with sea salt and thyme, lemon butter pasta with cherry tomatoes, warm bread with herbs baked right into the crust. I didn't worry about timing, about order, about whether things would be elevated. They didn't need to be. They just needed to be mine. The guests started arriving around 6. Each one brought something small, a bottle of something, a dish, a story. No one asked what to wear. No one tried to match the decor. They just came. Like people do when they want to, not when they feel they have to. We ate on mismatched plates, passed dishes around the table like old traditions reborn, laughed so loud I had to close the windows just a little. Not because of the neighbors, but because I wanted to keep the sound for myself. Halfway through dinner, Dina leaned back in her chair and said, "Linda, this is better than any wedding meal I've ever had." And it wasn't the food. I know that. It was the comfort. The belonging, the fact that no one here was watching to see if I matched the wallpaper. Here's one more thing I've learned in my years. Love isn't grand gestures. It's small consistencies. It's people who save you a seat without needing to be asked. At the end of the night, Claire raised her glass. To Linda, she said, for teaching us that the table was always yours. You just had to stop asking for permission to sit. Everyone clinked their glasses together. And me, I finally believed it. The day after the dinner, the house smelled like rosemary and lemon, and the leftover laughter still clung to the corners like warm light. I wandered through the kitchen, barefoot, sipping lukewarm coffee, and letting the quiet settle over me like a soft blanket. I hadn't thought about Ethan in hours. Maybe that's why the knock startled me. It was gentle but persistent, the kind of knock that wasn't going to leave. I opened the door halfway. There on the front steps stood Samantha. She was alone, no Ethan in sight. Her blonde hair was tied up neatly, makeup done just so, but her expression was tight, controlled. like a vase about to crack but determined to hold water just a little longer. Linda, she said, like we were friends, like I hadn't sat behind a swinging kitchen door at her wedding. Samantha, I replied flat. I just wanted to talk. I didn't invite her in. Just stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me. The porch was warm from the afternoon sun, and the wooden floor creaked beneath us as we stood. She took a breath. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I laughed. Not loudly, just that small, hollow kind of laugh that says we are not going to pretend, are we? A misunderstanding, I repeated. She winced slightly but pressed on. I know the seating wasn't ideal, but the theme— Stop, I said gently but firmly. She blinked. Her eyes widened like no one had ever interrupted her before. I sat behind the kitchen, I said, next to trays of half-eaten food. I was given a paper napkin and a chipped plate. You and I both know that wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. Her lips pressed together. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. I truly did. But then she said it was Ethan's decision too. That's when I felt it. The snap not of anger, but of clarity, like something locking into place. I know, I said. That's the part that hurts. She looked down at her shoes. Classic white sneakers, expensive clean. She wasn't used to standing on someone else's porch. I don't want this to affect our future relationship. Our relationship, I repeated. She nodded. We're family now. No, I said, shaking my head. We're not. She blinked again. Clearly this wasn't going how she imagined. Maybe she thought I'd crack, that I'd say I missed Ethan, that I'd ask what I could do to make things easier. But the thing is, once you realize you've been erased, there's no comfort in being penciled back in. I turned the doorknob behind me. You should go. She didn't argue. She just stood there for another second, her mouth parting as if she wanted to say something meaningful. But nothing came. And then she left. When the door shut behind me, it didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean. Like closing a chapter without needing to reread the last paragraph. I walked into the living room and sank into my armchair, the one I used to read bedtime stories in, the one Ethan would crawl into beside me when he was small and scared of thunder. I stared at the blank space on the wall where his graduation photo used to hang. And for the first time, I didn't miss it. Later that evening, I checked my email. Among the usual spam and newsletters, there was one message that stopped me cold. Subject line, refund request, declined, Greenfield Inn and Suites. The body of the message was short. Dear Miss Harris, as per our policy, cancellations made within 48 hours of the scheduled event are not eligible for refunds. The charges for the reception suite and extended brunch remain non-refundable. Thank you for your understanding. I smiled. Not because of the money, $800 was a small price to pay for what I'd taken back, but because even the hotel had clearer boundaries than I used to. That night, I pulled out an old photo album. Not the curated kind, the messy, real one. Ethan with missing teeth. Ethan in a Halloween costume too small for him. Ethan in the hospital with his first broken arm, brave face, teary eyes holding my hand. I flipped through slowly, page by page, not crying, not even angry, just absorbing the truth. I had built him a world, and he had outgrown it without looking back. You know, there's this phrase people like to use. She raised him right. But what they never say is this: you can raise someone with everything in you and still watch them choose someone else's applause. And that's not on you. That's on them. Here's a little quirky fact I read once in a parenting column. Toddlers will always choose the colorful toy over the steady hand. And sometimes adults do too. I closed the album. Then I picked up my phone. One new message from my cousin Lisa. Just wanted to say, you look beautiful at the wedding. I wish I had said something. I'm sorry I didn't come over. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Thank you for saying that. I wish someone had too. I didn't hit send. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need the closure anymore. Sometimes the power isn't in the message, it's in knowing you don't have to send it. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark. Not sad, not waiting. Just still. Let them wonder. Let them tell their version. I had mine, and mine was no longer silent. The next morning, I woke up to the scent of early autumn in the air, faintly sweet, a little sharp, the kind of crispness that makes your bones feel alert, even if your mind's still half asleep. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, poured a cup of coffee, and sat by the window like I had every morning for the past 2 weeks. But today, something felt different. My shoulders didn't slump. My stomach didn't clench at the thought of unread messages or the memory of that folding chair by the kitchen. I just sat, present, peaceful. My phone buzzed once. I let it. The screen lit up with Ethan's name, but I didn't move. I watched a bird flutter across the backyard fence and disappear into the hydrangeas. The same hydrangeas Samantha had said weren't elevated enough for the wedding centerpieces. That made me laugh. A real laugh, soft, not bitter. The kind that bubbles up when you realize just how absurd it all was. They thought a floral arch and a neon sign that read, "The future is forever," could make a memory unforgettable. But I would never forget that day for entirely different reasons. It had nothing to do with decorations. It had everything to do with how invisible I was made to feel. I finally picked up my phone and listened to the new voicemail. Ethan's voice was quieter this time, less polished. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry again. Things got out of control. Sam's been crying. Her parents are furious. I don't know what to do anymore. I wish you would just, I don't know, say something." I deleted it without saving. Not out of spite, out of necessity, because I had said something. I said it with the silence of no longer funding their futures. I said it with the absence of brunch flowers and the buzz of a bar that never opened. I said it when I chose my own dinner table, filled it with people who saw me and laughed so hard I forgot to feel erased. Ethan wanted words, a script, some version of me that would let this all smooth over. But I wasn't smoothing anything anymore. Later that day, I decided to take a drive. Not far, just down to the farmer's market in Lancaster. It was bustling in that small town's soft chaos kind of way. Kids pulling at their parents' hands, couples sipping cider slushies, old men talking about tomatoes like they were rare gems. I walked between the stalls slowly, touching the apples, running my fingers along jars of wildflower honey, inhaling the cinnamon and nutmeg from some booth selling handmade soap. No one knew me here. No one expected anything from me, and I felt more whole in that crowd of strangers than I had in an entire reception hall full of familiar faces. There's something powerful about anonymity, especially when you've spent decades being known only for what you give. I bought a jar of pickled okra, a small pie, and a bundle of sunflowers that I didn't need but wanted. Back home, I set the sunflowers in a mason jar and placed them on the table, right in the center. No one would walk by them and say they clashed with the palate. They were mine. I sliced the pie, sat on the porch, and ate the first real dessert I'd had since the wedding. Vanilla custard with spiced pears and a little dollop of whipped cream. No fondant, no gold-dusted layers, just comfort. Here's a piece of wisdom I've been slow to learn. You can love someone completely and still walk away from them. Love doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It doesn't mean shrinking yourself to fit in their frame. Sometimes love means saying, "I raised you better than this, but if you've forgotten, I won't remind you with my silence." As I finished the last bite of pie, a breeze lifted the corner of the napkin beside me. I watched it flutter weightless, dancing across the wood like it had somewhere to be. I let it go. That evening, I logged back into Facebook. The post of the wedding check was still up, now with over 300 comments. Some were outraged. A few were defensive. But most were women like me. My daughter made me sit at the overflow table, behind the DJ booth. They told me I could come to the ceremony, but not the reception, said it would be simpler. My son told me they didn't want too many speeches. I didn't even get a photo. I read them all. I replied to a few. Mostly, I just nodded, sitting in the dim glow of my screen, feeling the weight of an invisible club I didn't know I joined. Women erased by the children they carried. Mothers mistaken for props. The silent architects of milestone moments. I opened a new post draft. Typed. They say the mother of the groom is supposed to wear beige and keep her mouth shut. I did both. And still they found a way to silence me more. But I'm not quiet anymore. Then I hit post. No hashtags. No explanation. Just truth. Let them call it petty. Let them whisper. I was done asking for a seat. I had built my own damn table. I woke up the next morning to a strange feeling in my chest, not tightness, not dread, just room. Like someone had cracked open a window inside me and let the air back in. I didn't check my phone right away. I didn't need to. Instead, I padded into the kitchen barefoot, again the tile, cool beneath my feet. The sun was already rising strong through the blinds, making striped shadows on the floor. The house smelled faintly of pie crust and soap, and for the first time in a long while, that scent didn't make me feel lonely. It made me feel home. I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled by the window. The sunflower bouquet on the table had begun to lean slightly, their bright heads heavy with bloom. They looked tired and proud, a little like me, I suppose. When I finally picked up my phone, there were 2 new voicemails. Ethan again. "Mom, please, just tell me what you want. I don't know how to fix this if you won't talk to me." And Samantha. "Margaret, sorry, Linda. I'm not sure what the end game is here. We've apologized. We're trying. But you've made things really difficult for Ethan. For all of us. This just isn't what family does." I sat with that one for a moment. This isn't what family does. And yet, they were so sure what they did was fine. That was the part I couldn't stop turning over in my head. They acted like I'd flipped a table in the middle of the ceremony, like I'd made a scene or screamed through the speeches, but I didn't do any of that. I had just left. I had made a phone call, chose silence, refused to play the role they scripted for me. And for that, I was the villain, the petty one, the cold mother. But here's what they didn't get. Quiet women remember everything, every slight, every smirk, every time someone handed them a paper napkin instead of a seat at the table. I closed the messages and opened my camera roll instead. There, still saved from a week ago, was the photo I'd taken of the reception from the kitchen. Just a sliver through the swinging door. The gold chairs, the string lights, the silhouettes of dancing bodies blurred in motion. And there, off to the side, was Ethan, laughing. I had captured it by accident, meant to delete it. Now I'm glad I didn't, because that picture is what reminded me I didn't imagine this. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being erased, and I'd caught it in pixels. After breakfast, I packed a small bag and drove out to my late husband's storage unit. It was in a low-rise building on the edge of town, one of those places that always smelled like cardboard and dust and broken promises. I hadn't been there in years. The key still worked. Inside were boxes I hadn't opened since he died. Photo albums, college sweatshirts, a stack of letters wrapped in a rubber band, and under it all, a little cedar chest. I knew what was in there before I even lifted the lid. Old paperwork, hospital forms, legal things. And tucked in the very bottom, folded carefully in tissue paper, was Ethan's baby blanket. The one Michael told me he came home from the hospital in. It was yellow and faded now, soft around the edges. I pulled it into my lap and just sat there, breathing it in. That blanket was the first thing I ever held him in. The first thing that made me feel like Mom. And yet the man who handed it to me had done so under a lie. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Michael, not even at Samantha. But I was done forgiving silence. Done pretending the lie hadn't changed me. Because it had. I had built my entire identity around a child that wasn't mine by blood, but was mine in every way that ever mattered. And that love, that sacrifice, it deserved more than a folding chair and a cold chicken breast. Here's a strange, beautiful truth. I think most women eventually realize sometimes you don't get the apology. Sometimes you don't get the closure, but you do get the choice. And I had made mine. That evening, I came home and opened a new document on my laptop. At the top, I typed Living Will Update. I listed the items that would go to charity. I named Claire as my medical proxy. I wrote a note to Mr. Henderson about the garden tools. And then I reached the section for Ethan. I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I wrote, "To my son, Ethan, I loved you fully and fiercely. I gave you everything I had, even when it meant having nothing left for myself. I do not regret a single day of being your mother, but I have learned that being needed is not the same as being valued. If one day you find your way back to me, not out of obligation but recognition, I will be here. But until then, I am choosing peace." I saved the file, closed the laptop, sat back in my chair, and let the silence fill the room again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't waiting. It was mine. The next morning, I didn't check my phone at all. Not because I forgot, because I chose not to. That tiny square of glowing pressure had ruled my days for too long. I let it sit on the nightstand while I brewed coffee, fed the cat, and opened the window to let the breeze roll in. It was the kind of breeze that carries leaves with it soft and dancing. I watched a few tumble across the lawn, golden and rust-colored, and I thought, yes, that's what this feels like. Like fall. Not the end of something, but the shedding of what's no longer needed. I wrapped a cardigan around my shoulders, grabbed the garden shears from the garage, and wandered into the backyard. The roses were starting to close for the season. Still beautiful, still bold, but quieter now. I clipped a few stems and made a small bundle, carried them back in and set them on the kitchen table beside the sunflowers. No occasion, no guests, just me. Later, I walked down to Main Street, not for anything in particular. I stopped in at the bookstore Dina was working, as always, perched behind the counter with her readers pushed to the end of her nose. When she saw me, her eyes softened. "Linda," she said, "you okay?" I nodded. "I think I'm more than okay." She came around the counter and gave me a hug without asking. The kind of hug that says, I don't know the details, but I know what it's like to be invisible. I picked up a paperback I'd been meaning to read for years. A mystery novel, nothing profound. But it was mine. My choice. My time. As I was checking out, she handed me a second book on the house. "I think you'll like this one," she said. "It's about a woman who disappears from her old life and finds something better." I smiled. Sounds familiar. I walked home slowly, letting the breeze lift the corners of the paper bag as I passed the same trees Ethan used to climb when he was little. I remembered once he got stuck halfway up and screamed until I ran outside. I climbed up after him barefoot, scratched my knee on the bark. He was sobbing so hard he couldn't even speak. But he wrapped his arms around my neck, buried his face in my shoulder, and whispered, "I knew you'd come." I remembered that like it was yesterday. And now he was the one silent, waiting, hoping I'd come to him. But I wouldn't. Not this time. Because here's something I finally understand. Love that's only convenient isn't love. It's habit. It's comfort. It's shadow, not substance. Back home, I opened my laptop again, not the will this time. A new document. A letter. One I didn't know if I'd send. "Ethan, I've spent most of my life protecting you. From scraped knees, from heartbreak, from late fees and overdue papers, and the cold truth that this world doesn't always care about effort. I did all that gladly. But I won't protect you from this. Not from the consequences of your choices, not from the pain of realizing you hurt someone who never stopped showing up. This isn't punishment. It's distance. And it's mine to claim. I hope one day you understand that it's not silence, it's peace." Mom. I sat back rereading it. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was clear. That's what I had now. Not closure, not reconciliation. Clarity. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen again, reheating leftover pasta from the dinner party. As I stirred the pot, the smell of garlic and lemon filled the air, and I remembered something my grandmother used to say, "If you want to feel alive, make your house smell like food again." So I did. I lit a candle, played the same jazz station from last week, set one plate, one napkin, one fork, and I sat at the head of my table, not out of spite, out of choice. There's this idea, especially for mothers, that dignity comes from endurance, from swallowing the hurt, from clapping anyway. But I've learned that real dignity comes when you finally say no more. I didn't eat fast. I didn't multitask. I didn't scroll. I savored each bite like it was a quiet thank you to the woman I'd been too tired to be for years. That night, I slept with the window cracked open. The wind was gentle, the silence full, not empty. I dreamed of nothing dramatic, just a dinner table full of people laughing, sunlight spilling through the curtains, and me pouring wine like I'd done it my whole life. Because maybe I had. But now, it was for me. The next day, I deleted Ethan's contact from my phone. Just the name, not the number. I didn't want to pretend he never existed. I just didn't want to see his name lighting up my screen like it still belonged there. It was the smallest act of detachment, and yet it felt enormous. like removing a brick from the foundation of a house I no longer lived in. I made coffee and drank it on the porch. The wind had picked up a bit overnight, and the neighbor's scarecrow had tipped sideways in the garden. Its hat flapped against the wooden frame like it was trying to fly away. I knew how that felt. There were no new messages from Ethan that morning. Not from Samantha either. Just quiet. Just the kind of silence that doesn't feel like punishment anymore. It feels like space. Mid-morning, I drove to the grocery store for a few things. Just bread, milk, cat food. The essentials. In the bakery aisle of all places, I saw her, Lisa, my cousin. She was holding a pack of mini muffins and staring at the price like it had personally offended her. When she spotted me, she gave a hesitant smile. "Linda," she said, "hey." I nodded, soft. "Hey." She stepped closer. Her eyes flicked down like she wasn't sure how to hold them on me. "Are you okay?" It was the same question everyone asks when they don't know where to begin. I tilted my head and asked, "Were you okay?" Watching me sit back there. Her face turned red. I didn't realize that was on purpose," she stammered. "I thought maybe you wanted to stay out of the way." I smiled, gently. "No, Lisa." I was placed out of the way. There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "It was wrong. I should have said something." I nodded. "Thank you." That was all I needed from her, not a grand gesture. Just that small acknowledgement that I hadn't imagined it. She looked relieved, like a weight had slid off her shoulders. It hadn't lifted anything from mine, but it was a start. After we parted ways, I went back home, unpacked the groceries, and saw a small box on my front porch. A bouquet. Carnations. Already wilting. No card. Of course not. I didn't bring them inside. I walked them straight to the trash bin and dropped them in without ceremony. Sometimes the olive branch comes too late. Sometimes the tree it came from has already been cut down. That evening, I logged back onto Facebook to check the post again. The check photo. It had nearly 500 comments now. Messages from strangers. From friends I hadn't heard from in years. From women who had been erased, downsized, miscast. One comment stopped me. "This broke my heart, Linda, and I've never related to something so deeply. Thank you for showing us we don't have to stay quiet." I read it twice, then a third time. That's when I realized this wasn't about Ethan anymore. This was about me and every woman like me who had quietly swallowed betrayal for the sake of being included. No more. Here's a little side note I came across recently. The phrase, cutting the cord, doesn't just mean birth. It also applies to letting go when it's time to stop feeding something that no longer feeds you back. I turned off the phone again. I didn't need the noise. I didn't need their spin. I wasn't explaining myself to people who already decided my silence was easier to live with than my truth. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters, fed the cat. Peace doesn't come from fixing things. It comes from stopping the effort to fix what was never yours to repair. Around dinner time, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. Whoever it was knocked again. A little louder this time. Still, I didn't move. They could wait. They could sit in their own discomfort the way I sat in mine between used trays and kitchen steam wondering what I had done wrong. Let them feel the unanswered knock. Let them wonder what silence really sounds like. Later that night, I posted one more thing on Facebook. Not a caption, not a photo of the dinner, not a quote. Just a picture of the box of receipts. Stacked. Documented. Signed. No names, just numbers. Proof that I had given and given and given. And that now I was done. Let them draw their own conclusions. I wasn't writing anyone's narrative, but mine. When I woke the next morning, the comments were pouring in. Some angry, some supportive, but most just quiet stories from women who were tired of being good for too long. One message read, "They told me it wasn't personal, but it felt personal. I cried in a hotel bathtub for 3 hours. I wish I'd done what you did." And that was when I understood this wasn't a scandal. This was a pattern. And maybe I was the first one in my circle to break it. But I wouldn't be the last. The invitation list started with silence. Not glitter pens, not a shared Google Doc, just a lined yellow notepad and the soft scratch of a ballpoint pen. I wrote the names slowly, one by one, not from duty, but from memory. Not people I had to invite, people I wanted to. Claire, of course, went at the top. Then Mr. Henderson from next door, who always shoveled my walkway before I even opened the door. Dana, the bookstore clerk who asked how I was every Sunday and didn't flinch when I actually answered honestly. Janet from the old ER team, who once took an extra shift so I could be home for Ethan's 6th grade spelling bee. Not one of them was related to me, but they had all, in small ways, made me feel seen. This time I wasn't planning a wedding. I wasn't organizing a milestone. I wasn't covering costs for someone else's dream. This was a dinner, just dinner, at my house, with my food, on my terms. No folding chairs, no theme, and absolutely no back doors. I spent the next few days preparing not for perfection, but for joy. I picked up a new tablecloth from a thrift store. It was soft blue with sunflowers scattered along the edges. The kind of thing I would have liked when I was 20 before all the shoulds started piling up on my shoulders like bricks. I bought fresh herbs from the farmer's market, chose vegetables that smelled earthy, real. I picked lemons by touch, firm, bright, promising flavor. And I didn't once wonder if Ethan would have approved of the choices, because this wasn't his, it was mine. The morning of the dinner, I woke early, not out of nerves, out of excitement. I played music while I cooked. Norah Jones again, then some Stevie Nicks, a little Otis Redding for balance. The house swelled with scent, garlic, and lemon-roasted tomatoes, bread rising in the oven. The sun poured in like it was invited. The first knock came just before 6. Claire, of course, with a bottle of red wine and a mischievous smile. "You look good, Linda," like someone who's finally off duty. I did. I wore a soft gray blouse that made me feel clean and light. My hair wasn't curled, just brushed. My cheeks were bare, no mascara to melt under stress this time. The rest trickled in like the perfect timing of a lazy rain. Laughter at the door, long hugs. Someone brought a peach cobbler. Someone else brought their mother's vintage wine glasses wrapped in a dish towel. We sat around my table, the same table where I used to fold laundry and balance the checkbook and help Ethan with math homework. And now it was filled with roasted vegetables, warm bread, a bowl of lemon butter pasta, and little stories spilled between bites. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't talk about Ethan. We talked about bad first dates, burned casseroles, the way the post office keeps changing hours without telling anyone. Claire admitted she once stole a pen from the bank every week for 3 months just because they refused to open another window. We laughed, really laughed. And here's something I hadn't felt in months: lightness. Like the air around me wasn't weighing me down. Somewhere between the salad and dessert, I realized this was family, not assigned, chosen. No one here had asked me to prove myself. No one here had needed my money to stay. They came because they wanted to, because they loved me. Toward the end of the evening, we migrated to the back porch. The same porch Ethan used to toss his backpack on after school. The same one where he asked me once if he was ever going to have a real family. He didn't remember that, I'm sure. But I did. Tonight, under the string lights I'd strung up myself, Claire raised a glass. To Linda, she said, looking right at me. For being the kind of woman who reminds the rest of us that it's never too late to take your seat at the head of your own table. The clinking of glasses felt like music. I raised mine too. For the first time in years, my hand didn't shake. To finally being seen, I said. We drank, and no one needed a program to know who I was. Later that night, after the dishes were rinsed and the last goodbyes said, I sat back at the kitchen table. Just me, the empty glasses, the sunflower tablecloth now dotted with crumbs and wine rings. It was beautiful. Not perfect, but beautiful. The kind of mess that says you were here, and you mattered. My phone buzzed once. A new message from Ethan. Just 3 words, "Are we okay?" I stared at it for a long time. Then slowly I typed, "I'm okay." I didn't hit send, because the truth was I didn't need to explain my healing to the person who broke me. I set the phone down, went to bed, and slept without dreams. The knock came just after noon. Not loud, not urgent, but steady, like he knew I was home and he wasn't going to leave until I opened the door. I stood in the hallway barefoot, watching his silhouette behind the frosted glass. Shoulders hunched, head slightly down. He was alone. No Samantha, no Karen, just Ethan. 7 days since the wedding. 7 days of silence from me. 7 days of unraveling for him. I opened the door slowly. He looked the same, and not. His shirt was wrinkled, his face puffy like he hadn't been sleeping well. There were shadows beneath his eyes, and something hesitant in the way he stood, like he didn't know whether to hug me or beg. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't say it back. I stepped aside. He hesitated, then walked past me into the house, eyes drifting across the living room like it was foreign to him now. His gaze landed on the walls, the empty walls. The photos were gone, every one of them. His face twisted slightly, not in anger, more like confusion. "Where are the pictures?" he asked. I ignored the question. "Sit," I said. He obeyed like he used to when he was 5 and knew he was in trouble. I walked to the coat closet and returned with the box, the one with the receipts, the records, the contracts. I placed it on the coffee table between us like it was evidence. "What is this?" he asked, already knowing. I sat across from him. Everything I said, everything I paid for, everything I planned, everything I gave. He started flipping through it. Linen samples, menu tastings, the deposit for the signature cocktail bar, Samantha's hand-calligraphed invitations, the altered invoice for the second band shift, canceled the night of the wedding. His throat worked, but no sound came. Then I handed him the letter, the one with his father's handwriting. The truth. He took it like it weighed more than paper. "Read it in silence." His eyes moved quickly at first, then slowly. When he finished, he looked up pale. "You knew?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "I do now." He blinked fast. I didn't know she asked him to give me up. I thought I was yours." I leaned forward, kept my voice level. "You were mine, in every way that mattered. But when it mattered most to you, you didn't see me." He swallowed, eyes glinting. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "I believe you." And I did. But that wasn't the point anymore. "You stood at that altar," I continued, "and thanked Samantha's parents. You toasted to her family. You said you felt at home with them. And you left me behind the swinging door with a tray of shrimp cocktail and a folding chair. I didn't mean to, but you did." I said it softly. No heat, just truth. He stared at his hands. "Samantha said it would look better that way," he mumbled. "For the pictures." I leaned back, let the silence do the rest. "Do you remember your 10th birthday?" I asked. He looked up surprised. "The one with the chocolate cake and the rented bounce house. You wanted a magician, but I couldn't afford both, so I learned card tricks for 2 weeks just to pretend." He nodded, eyes filling. "I worked nights for that party. I stitched together 3 jobs for years. I skipped meals so you could have braces and soccer cleats. And I did it because I loved you, not because I needed to be thanked, but because I thought you'd never forget me when it counted." His voice cracked. "I didn't mean to forget you." "But you did." I stood and walked over to the mantel, picked up one of the empty frames. "This used to hold a picture of your kindergarten graduation," I said, holding it up. "You ran off the stage and jumped into my arms. You called me Mommy and told me I was your best friend." He was crying now. I placed the frame face down on the shelf. "I'm not your backdrop anymore," I said. "I'm not your bank. I'm not your afterthought." He wiped his face with the back of his hand, breathing shakily. "I want to fix this." I walked to the door, opened it wide. "You can't fix what you won't name," I said, "and you still haven't said the words." He stepped toward me, the box of receipts still in his hands. "I'm sorry, Mom, I chose them. I let them erase you." I nodded once, finally. Then I took the box from him, closed the lid, and handed it back. "These are yours now, every receipt, every record, every reminder of what you chose to overlook." He looked at it like it might burn him. Then he stepped outside. At the threshold, he turned back. "You always said I was your whole world." "You were," I said, "and now I'm finally mine." Then I closed the door, softly, not like an ending, like a beginning. The air inside the house was warm. Light filtered through the windows. The silence didn't ache. I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, put on a little music, and sat down at my table, my seat, my life. The laughter that night was real. Not the kind you fake at someone's joke when you're trying to be polite. No, this was the kind that comes from deep in your chest, unexpected, unforced. The kind that lingers even after the punchline fades. And it was mine. My home was filled again, not with guests I needed to impress, not with people who calculated their kindness, but with presence. Honest, easy, ordinary presence. Mr. Henderson had brought over one of his infamous cherry pies. "Don't let the crust fool you," he said. "I overbaked the edges, but the inside's perfect." It was. Janet recounted a story about her husband locking himself out in his bathrobe. Dina chimed in with a running commentary that had us in stitches. Claire just laughed until she cried, and I laughed with her, wiping my eyes, feeling the release. I had worried quietly whether the joy I felt during the first dinner could happen again, whether it had been a fluke, a single spark in a long, dark tunnel. But here we were, lighting up the room again. Not for show, for real. I was standing at the stove barefoot, plating up roasted vegetables with thyme and sea salt. I placed the dish in the center of the table right next to the sunflowers, which even wilting still made people smile. As I sat down, Claire raised her glass. "To Linda," she said, smiling gently now. "To choosing yourself." I blushed just a little, but didn't look away. "To finally knowing when to stop giving to people who only know how to take," she added. The clinking of glasses felt sacred. Everyone took a sip. The moment lingered. The warmth in the room thickened like something sacred had been acknowledged and given permission to stay. I stood up slowly, glass still in hand. I looked around the table, each face chosen, not assigned by birth, but by something better intention. To the mothers, I said, my voice calm but clear, who stayed quiet for too long. Everyone was silent eyes on me. To the women who gave everything and were told it still wasn't enough, a few heads nodded. To the ones who were asked to sit in the kitchen after building the damn house. Claire let out a sharp exhale, almost a laugh, almost a sob. "This," I said, lifting my glass a little higher, "is for us. May we never sit down again unless it's at the head of our own table." Cheers followed, not loud, just enough. A single tear slipped from my eye, not from sadness, from recognition, from being heard, from hearing myself. We passed the bread, poured another glass, took seconds of the vegetables and the pie and the cobbler that Dina had somehow improved from the last time. Someone made a joke about wedding hashtags. Someone else admitted they'd faked a sprained ankle once to get out of a baby shower. We laughed, and I stayed in my seat, not circling the room, not cleaning before people were finished, not serving in silence. I sat, I talked, I chewed slowly, I was seen. At one point, Claire reached across the table and took my hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. This is what healing looks like, not tidy or glamorous, not something that comes with a ribbon. It looks like women sitting together, finally being honest. It looks like paper napkins replaced with cloth ones, not because anyone needed them, just because I wanted them. It looks like candles flickering without pressure to impress. And it looks like me, arms relaxed, heart light, no longer aching from carrying people who never looked back. Daniel Ethan would always be a part of me. That's what years of love do. But I no longer lived in the house of his validation. I'd packed up my room and moved out. I had planted new roots in softer ground. By the time the night wound down, the stars were out. Everyone helped clean, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The kind of small kindnesses I used to do for others without ever receiving in return. And when the last guest had gone and the house had returned to its quiet, I sat down one final time at the table. The candle still burned low. The air smelled like thyme and lemon zest. And I whispered to no one and everyone all at once, "I am not sorry. Not for the wedding. Not for the silence. Not for the truth. And especially not for finally saying no to a world that asked me to be generous without ever making room for me." I took one last sip of wine, blew out the candle, and turned off the lights. But the glow, it stayed. The next morning I woke before the sun. The air was still, the kind of quiet that feels intentional, like the world is giving you a moment to just be. I pulled my robe tight and stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming gently in my hand. The sky was that soft blue-gray just before the first streaks of gold break through. I sat there in the hush, letting it all settle. Not the noise of the past few weeks, but the silence that followed it. The good kind. The kind that doesn't demand anything. The kind that feels earned. The house behind me was still, but not empty. The walls, though bare of old photos, were finally breathing again, the kind of clean that doesn't feel sterile, just open, ready, like me. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn a seat at someone else's table, so much of it convincing myself that love meant sacrifice, and that to be a mother meant being invisible so long as your children were happy. But somewhere between the folded napkins and the cold plate in the kitchen, I remembered I have always been here, giving, showing up, holding space. And now I've finally held space for myself. To anyone out there who's ever felt like the extra, the afterthought, the woman behind the swinging door, you are not alone. You were never the problem. You were the foundation. And sometimes the quietest ones carry the loudest truths. So here's mine. I'm not waiting for anyone to hand me my worth anymore. I've set the table, lit the candle, poured the wine, and I've taken my seat at the head where I belong,